It started with a light. A single warm bulb glowing in the corner window of apartment 6B, soft amber, almost gentle. It stayed on through December, then January, then February, through blizzards and blackout warnings and bills sliding under doors. The neighbors stopped noticing after a while, until someone asked, "When was the last time we actually saw the woman who lives there?" Her name was Marion Rose Lark. She had no visitors, no pets, no drama. She liked herbal tea crossword puzzles and listening to the same Ella Fitzgerald album while doing dishes. She was not the kind of woman you noticed, not until she was gone. There was no break-in, no struggle, no screams, just absence. But the light, that light never went out. And inside her apartment, quiet, locked from the inside, someone had left things behind. A coffee cup still stained. A chair angled slightly toward the hallway vent. And a drawer full of unsent letters, each addressed to someone who didn't know she was missing. One read, "If anyone ever finds this, it means I was right. Rochester, New York." Not the part you see on postcards, not the glittering snow on park benches or coffee shops with jazz playing through foggy windows. This is the other side of winter. Grey, cracked, quiet in a way that feels less peaceful and more abandoned. The building sat on a corner lot off South Avenue. 3 stories of weary brick, a faded awning that flapped when the wind got bitter. It was the kind of place you moved into when you didn't want to be found or when you had nowhere else left to go. Inside narrow hallways, tired carpet, the smell of old radiator steam and dust sealed into the walls. Apartment 6B was on the 3rd floor. No balcony, no natural light, just a window overlooking a cracked parking lot and a heavy wooden door with a brass peephole scuffed from years of tenants looking out. The woman who lived there, Marion Rose Lark, was what some neighbors called quietly vanished. Not vanished in the obvious sense, not suddenly, not dramatically, but like the slow fade of breath on cold glass. She moved in during the spring of 1997, 5.5 years before anyone noticed she was gone. To most, she was polite but distant. She worked downtown as a paralegal, civil claims, landlord-tenant disputes, took the same bus every morning at 7:42, ate lunch at her desk, left at 6. She wore neat slacks, pressed coats, and always the same deep burgundy lipstick, even in the middle of July. She liked order. In her cupboards, all the tea tins were alphabetized. Her bed was made with military corners. She hung her keys on a single brass hook next to the fridge, a hook shaped like a seahorse. And she wrote letters. Not to mail, not usually. She wrote to people from her past or to people she imagined. In the nightstand of 6B was a stack of yellowing envelopes, some addressed to Mother, others to you if you're reading this. One simply said, "To the man I thought I saw." No one ever visited Marion. She told co-workers her family had passed, no siblings, no children. She spoke about an ex-husband once, Jeff in Tampa, but rarely. Just said, "We tried, we didn't match." To her neighbors, she was a flicker of presence. A woman glimpsed through frosted glass watering a plant, a shadow in the hallway returning home at dusk, a soft hum of Ella Fitzgerald on vinyl, always side B. But something shifted in the fall of 2002. Callie, a grad student who lived across the hall in 6C, recalled hearing Marion's phone ring at strange hours, ringing and ringing unanswered. Another tenant noticed the smell of soup tomato. Maybe basil that used to waft through the hall on Sunday afternoons had gone silent. Even the mail began to pile up. Not dramatically, not spilling onto the floor, but enough to raise eyebrows. Still no one knocked. Because Marion had trained the building how to treat her with polite distance. And polite distance can become deadly silence if stretched long enough. Then, in December, the first real crack appeared. Marion filed a maintenance request, handwritten, slid under the office door. Hallway light outside 6B keeps flickering. Also, is there a way to check if someone has been inside my unit when I'm not home? It was the kind of question that pretends to be rhetorical, but it wasn't. Later, Detective Janice Lowell would stare at that note and whisper, she knew. No one followed up on the request. The hallway bulb was replaced, nothing more. And then just like that, she was gone. No last phone call, no suitcase, just a cup still on the table, a sweater on the back of a chair, a record needle stopped mid-track. Her car, a pale blue Dodge Spirit, sat untouched in the same parking spot for weeks, but the rent was still paid. Auto debit like clockwork. It wasn't until February that anyone began to really wonder why the light in 6B never went off. The building manager knocked once, waited, left. But Callie felt it in her bones. You ever feel like a room is watching you? She would ask later. That's what it felt like walking past 6B. Inside that apartment, behind that locked door, something had stopped, but the light hadn't. And that's when the silence began to feel like a scream. It was a smell that finally forced the question. Not strong, not putrid, just off. Callie noticed it first, standing in front of her door, fumbling for keys one snowy night in late January. A faint scent of something metallic and sweet, like rust and old apples. It didn't make her gag, it made her uneasy. Like something was where it shouldn't be. She paused outside 6B, sniffing the air. She looked at the door, dark wood, perfectly closed, and then she saw it. The peephole was covered. A tiny square of black electrical tape carefully placed from the inside. Marion never did that before, and Marion always said goodnight when their paths crossed. Always. That was the moment Callie knew something was wrong. She knocked. 3 light raps. Waited. Nothing. She leaned closer, ear to the door. Silence. But not true silence, there was still that hum. Not the fridge, not the heater. A low, vibrating presence like an old television left on mute. Callie knocked again. Marion, it's me, Callie. Are you okay? Still nothing. She went downstairs to the manager's office where George Mullins was watching hockey and not looking up from his sandwich. George, something's wrong in 6B. I haven't seen Marion in weeks and her peephole is taped over. George shrugged. She's quiet. Always has been. Rent's paid. She's never taped her peephole and her mail is piling up. George sighed. Want me to knock? They went upstairs. George knocked. Marion, it's George. You all right in there? Silence. He jiggled the handle, locked. He leaned in, pressed his ear against the wood. After a beat, he pulled back, face pale. What is it? Callie asked. Thought I heard something. A drip, or breathing, or... He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he muttered something about filing a maintenance report and walked off. That night, Callie couldn't sleep. She sat in the dark with her hallway light on, eyes fixed on the thin seam under Marion's door across from hers. At 2:19 a.m., she thought she saw a shadow shift behind it. She held her breath. It didn't move again. 2 days later, the building's heat dropped inexplicably. The technician sent to inspect the vents knocked on 6B out of habit, no answer. When he checked the blueprints, he noticed something odd. The vent shaft that ran through 6A and 6B had a dead space, a small crawl space used decades ago for old insulation sealed off during retrofits. Except it wasn't sealed. The panel was still loose. And that was the first time someone mentioned the vents. Callie remembered weeks earlier hearing noises at night, faint scratching like nails on duct metal. She'd chalked it up to rats or bad insulation. But now the pattern returned in her head. Always around 2 a.m., always just before she heard the phone in 6B ring. Ring and ring and ring. She brought it up to George again. He brushed her off. It's winter. Buildings creak. But the calls. I don't track tenant phone calls, Callie. That same day, Marion's grocery delivery was returned, left outside her door for hours before someone finally took it to the front office. A small bag of items. Her usual order: jasmine rice, tomato paste, peppermint tea. Unopened. Callie knocked again that night, louder. She pressed her ear to the door. This time she didn't hear the hum. She heard a click. A soft, deliberate one from the other side of the door. She stepped back, heart racing. The next morning she went to the police. Officer Daniel Rourke arrived at 6B around 10 a.m. the following day. He knocked, waited, knocked again. When there was no answer, he requested permission from the landlord to enter under wellness check protocol. George hesitated. Doors deadbolted from inside, he said. Key won't help. Rourke raised an eyebrow. You're sure? Positive. Rourke tried anyway. Inserted the master key. It stopped short. Deadbolt engaged. He stepped back, looked at the door, then at the hallway vent. A chill moved through the space like breath through a flute. Callie watched from her doorway, arms crossed over her chest. He's still in there, she whispered. Rourke turned. Who? She hesitated. I don't know, but it's not Marion. The door to apartment 6B was breached at 9:42 a.m., February 13th, 2003. Officer Rourke stood to the side as the locksmith drilled through the deadbolt. The building was quiet, too quiet for a Thursday morning. No music, no footsteps, just the rhythmic burr of the drill echoing through the third floor like something trying to wake up. When the lock finally gave, the door swung open with a long, tired sigh. And what they found inside was nothing. Nothing violent, nothing chaotic, no blood, no struggle, just absence. Marion was gone, but everything else was there. The apartment looked untouched, warm, still. On the kitchen counter, a tea kettle sat half full, spotted with mineral stains. Next to it, a mug-clean bone china with a hairline crack along the rim. A book rested beside it, open to the middle, The Secret History by Donna Tartt, the kind of novel you keep meaning to finish. A pair of reading glasses lay on the windowsill, catching weak morning light. There was dust, enough to suggest time had passed, but not much. Nothing was packed, no suitcase missing. Her clothes were in the closet, organized by season. Shoes in neat rows labeled boxes tags, still on some. A coat, her usual navy wool one, hung by the door. But Marion was nowhere. In the bedroom, the bed was made. Not hospital corner tight, but carefully, deliberately. One pillow had a small indent, as if it had been pressed by the weight of a hand, then left alone. On the nightstand, a bottle of sleeping pills, untouched, a half-burned candle, and a stack of envelopes. Rourke picked them up. The first was addressed to whom it may concern. Inside a list, times, dates, and what seemed like sounds. 11/12, 2:14. AM, tapping from wall. 11/15, 1:59 AM, whispering through vent. Can't tell if inside or outside. 11:20. Kitchen light flickered twice, then back on. 11/25. Lock feels different, reset pins. The list went on for pages, meticulously written in blue ink, slightly slanted, all caps. This wasn't a diary, this was a record. A log kept by someone who was trying desperately to prove they weren't imagining things. In the hall closet, tucked beneath an old vacuum and a shoebox full of Christmas ornaments, Rourke found something else. A sketch, hand-drawn on gridded paper, a layout of the apartment with annotations. Arrows pointed to the vents, to the space behind the hall wall, to the ceiling above the bathroom. One note read, "Measured this wall 4 inches of space unaccounted for." Another written in red, "Someone is in the walls." Rourke froze. He looked up at the hallway vent. The screws were slightly stripped, not rusted, just worn, like they'd been removed and replaced many times. He called it in. Within hours, detectives arrived. Crime scene tape, cameras, gloves. Detective Janice Lowell, newly assigned to missing persons, took the lead. She moved through the apartment slowly, like she was reading a poem in a foreign language. She paused at the book, the list, the drawing. She stood longest in the living room. There was something odd about the space. It was too tidy, not in the obsessive way, but curated, as if Marion had prepared it. And then she noticed the chair. A soft recliner in the corner facing not the TV, not the window, but the vent. It was angled precisely 17 degrees toward the hall, like a woman waiting for something or someone. Lowell knelt beside it, checked the seat cushion, found a single strand of hair, dark and fine, coiled like a question mark. No signs of forced entry, no damage, no fingerprints but Marion's. It was as if she'd evaporated or been erased gently. Later that night, Callie told the officers something she hadn't dared say earlier. "I used to hear a voice through the vent. I thought it was a TV or something, but it always said the same thing." They asked her what it said. She hesitated. "It said you shouldn't have looked at me." And in the quiet corner of 6B, the lamp still glowed. Same bulb, same yellow halo, soft, warm, and terribly out of place. Like a light left on in a home that no longer belonged to anyone at all. Detective Janice Lowell kept the light on. Not just in the apartment, though. She did request that no one turn it off, but on her desk. A sticky note with Marion's name stayed pinned above her computer long after the initial report went cold. Because something about the case felt unfinished, not just open undisturbed. Like a book missing not just its last page, but its entire final chapter. The preliminary report listed Marion Rose Lark as a voluntary disappearance, mental health status unknown. No signs of struggle, no confirmed foul play, no body, no witnesses, no crime. Legally, there was nothing to investigate. But Lowell kept coming back to that sketch. The measurements, the hand-drawn floor plan, the notes in the margins written by someone who wasn't spiraling into delusion, but methodically documenting something real. Measured wall, missing space 4.2 inches. Vibration from vent at 1:47 AM twice. Then silence. It wasn't paranoia, it was evidence. Just the kind that no one wanted to call evidence. The apartment was sealed after the initial search. Forensics went through every square inch. Nothing turned up. Cadaver dogs were brought in. They signaled briefly near the hallway vent and again in the shared crawl space between units, but no remains were found. No blood, no fibers, no trace. The air in the shaft was heavy, stagnant, thick with dust and insulation particles like the lungs of the building hadn't taken a full breath in decades. Lowell requested blueprints from the city planning office. Most were on microfilm, brittle and faded. She spent 3 evenings after hours tracing duct lines and floor plans by hand. And there it was again, a crawl space. Unmarked, unsealed. A gap between units 6A and 6B, once used for maintenance access in the 1950s. Now forgotten, except maybe not by everyone. In the weeks after Marion's disappearance, the complex began filling the unit's vacancy. 6B was cleaned, repainted, relisted. A young man, Daniel, a medical student, moved in. He lasted 3 months. At first, things were fine. He told the property manager he liked the layout, the light from the corner window, the silence. But slowly it changed. He said he felt like he was never alone, that objects in the apartment seemed to shift positions. He swore he heard someone moving inside the walls, faint scraping as if nails or buttons were dragging against plaster. Then the dream started. Always the same. He was sitting in the recliner. The vent across from him began to open slat by slat, and a voice from inside whispered, "Are you looking at me now?" He broke his lease mid-semester, moved back home, left the keys on the counter and taped a note to the mirror. There's something behind the wall. Lowell followed up, interviewed him twice. Each time he seemed more uncertain, like memory itself was working against him. But there was one detail he remembered clearly. The light, the lamp in the corner. He never turned it on. Every night I came home, he said it was already on, even when I swore I'd shut it off. Marian's digital life was a dead end. Her bank account remained untouched. No activity on her phone, which was never recovered. No passport. No medical records since October 2002. Emails ended abruptly. Her last was to a co-worker, a single sentence. Have you ever felt like someone already knew what you were going to do? Spring came, then summer. The case file thickened with dust. Lowell's captain suggested she close it. It's been 6 months, no new leads. But Janice couldn't shake the feeling. Not fear, not exactly. Just a persistent hum, the same kind Marian had written about. That feeling of being watched by something that doesn't need to blink. So she did something most detectives don't. She went back to the apartment, alone. She sat in the recliner, faced the vent, waited. She stayed for nearly 2 hours, heard nothing, saw nothing. But when she stood to leave, she noticed something she hadn't before. Behind the couch, tucked beneath the baseboard, was a single sheet of lined paper curled from age, written in Marian's hand. I don't think he wants to hurt me. I think he wants me to stay. And I'm starting to wonder if I've already said yes. It wasn't the note behind the couch that cracked the case open, not directly, but it gave Detective Janice Lowell a keyword. Stay. She started feeding it into everything. Archived calls, digital documents, maintenance requests, even voicemail transcripts from other tenants. And that's when she found it, an incident report from 2001 filed by a woman named Deborah Hoyt, who had lived in 6A, the unit adjacent to Marian's, just over a year before Marian disappeared. The report described a strange man seen walking the hallway at 2 a.m. Deborah claimed he wore a maintenance uniform, though she couldn't recall seeing his face. He never knocked, never said a word. She reported hearing tapping in her walls, the smell of paint or chemicals coming from her closet. And one night she claimed she woke up standing in the hallway barefoot with her apartment door ajar, and no memory of how she got there. The building never followed up. Deborah moved out a month later. Her forwarding address led nowhere. But in the margin of her statement she'd written, I heard it too, through the vent, just one word, stay. Lowell circled it in red ink. With that, she shifted focus from Marian the missing to the building itself. She requested every maintenance file from 1995 to 2003. Most were mundane leaky faucets, dead outlets, cockroach complaints. But one name appeared 6 times in notes across different apartments, T. Keegan. Not a resident, not a full-time employee, just a temp. He'd done contract work for the building for 3 months in late 2002. The same window Marian had logged her vent complaints. There was no full name, just initials, no phone number, no address. Lowell dug further. T. Keegan had also signed in at 3 other buildings across Rochester that same year. In each case, the pattern was the same. Tenants reported strange smells, lights flickering, hearing movement in the walls. Then one person would leave, abruptly. Lease broken, no forwarding address. In one of those buildings, 14 Maplewood Street, a woman named Sienna Rourke had gone missing. Lowell called the precinct to request case files. The name triggered a pause on the line. Did you say Rourke? Yes, like Daniel Rourke, Officer Rourke. Lowell blinked. Rourke had been the first officer to respond to Marian's case. He never mentioned the name Sienna, never said she was his sister. That night she drove across town, found Daniel sitting on his front porch staring at a beer bottle like it was a ticking clock. He didn't deny it. Sienna had vanished in 2001. Same type of building, same layout, same timing. She had been complaining of hallway drafts and someone knocking on the wrong side of the wall. When Lowell asked why he hadn't told anyone, Daniel stared down the street and said, because no one believes people disappear slowly anymore. Then he handed her a box. Inside were photos, dozens. Old film prints, some warped with time. All of interiors, apartments, bedrooms, living rooms. All taken from low angles near vents or heating grates. Watching. One photo froze Lowell's blood. It was Marian, sitting in her chair, head turned toward the window. But it wasn't a portrait. It was taken through the vent. On the back, someone had written, she looked at me but didn't scream. From that moment, the case changed. Lowell cross-referenced the buildings in the photos. 5 were confirmed missing persons cases, no resolution, no bodies. She submitted a formal request to the State Crime Lab for digital enhancement of timestamps. 2 photos had metadata, both from late 2002. The most chilling one showed Marian asleep, but something was off. Her head hung at an unnatural angle. Her hands were crossed over her chest, not relaxed, but posed. And at the very bottom edge of the frame, nearly out of sight, a hand. Not hers. Someone else had been in the apartment, had watched her, had touched her, and had taken their time. Now it wasn't about proving Marion was missing. It was about proving someone else had always been there. Lowell opened a full investigation into Thomas Keegan. The trouble was, he didn't exist. Not legally, not digitally, only in paper sign-ins and faint penmanship, only in the walls. And as the light in apartment 6B flickered for the first time in over a year, Lowell realized this wasn't a break-in, it was an invitation. And Marion may have been the only one who ever declined. Too late. There's a moment in every investigation when the trail doesn't just go cold, it turns inward. When the question shifts from who did this to how long have they been here. Detective Janice Lowell was now deep inside that moment. The name Thomas Keegan wasn't in any DMV registry, no birth certificate, no tax filings, no utility bills, just a few scratchy signatures on old maintenance forms scattered across upstate New York. And the same oddly stylized handwriting, all caps sharp slants, looped A's on every one. Lowell sat in a city records office squinting under flickering fluorescent lights when she found the first real fracture. A building permit from 1984, a renovation project for a long-demolished apartment complex. The contractor listed Keegan Property Solutions. It was a shell company, closed within a year, but the application included something rare, a photocopy of the original business license, signed by one Daniel T. Keegan. The signature matched perfectly. She cross-referenced the address on file, a P.O. box no longer in service, but the zip code linked to an area outside Syracuse, an industrial zone, mostly abandoned. But one parcel of land still had a structure. A former boiler house, converted decades ago into storage, now silent. Lowell didn't wait for backup. The drive was long, grey skies, radio off. She parked behind the rusted shell of the building and stepped through a sagging door into a space that smelled of copper and mold. It was dark, no power. She used her flashlight sparingly, not to save batteries, but because every beam of light made her stomach tighten. The walls were covered in insulation board, some of it torn away to reveal a web of tunnels, ductwork, vents, and photos, hundreds of them, taped along the beams like a gallery no one was meant to see. All taken from inside walls, from ceilings, from crawl spaces. Some were blurred, others terrifyingly clear. Women brushing their hair, reading, eating dinner, sleeping. One showed a woman sitting cross-legged on her bed, staring directly at the lens. Her name was written in Sharpie across the top, Nora. Lowell kept walking, stomach churning. Then she found the chair. Placed at the far end of the room facing a blank wall, a single light bulb hung overhead unlit, and beside the chair, a shoebox. Inside were items tagged in faded ink, 6B keys, 6B T-tin, 6B hair, and one more envelope. Inside a photo, Marion, eyes closed, hands folded, laid back in her recliner. But this wasn't a candid photo, it was posed. The timestamp in the corner read December 4th, 2002, 3:13 a.m. Marion hadn't walked away, she hadn't lost her mind, she had been staged. The last detail made Lowell's skin crawl. In the bottom right corner, something scribbled in ink. She stayed, but only after she stopped struggling. Back in Rochester, Lowell brought in forensic psychologists. They confirmed what she feared. This wasn't about control, not about violence, it was about presence. The perpetrator didn't want to abduct. He wanted to be with his victims, to share space with them without consent, to live beside them inside their walls, behind their vents, always there, always watching. When Marion began documenting the sounds, measuring the walls, writing the letters, she broke that spell. She noticed him. And that's when the predator stopped watching and started acting. Lowell made one more trip to apartment 6B. She brought crime scene text, demolition gear blueprints. This time they tore into the wall behind the closet and found it. A narrow shaft, no more than 18 inches wide, running the full height of the building. Inside a mattress had a flashlight and a set of keys. The keys were to 6B. The case went public. Photos leaked. News anchors called it the Watcher in the Walls. Podcasts speculated. People claimed to know Keegan. No one could prove he was still alive. But that wasn't the part that haunted Lowell. It was something simpler. Something she remembered reading in one of Marion's unsent letters. Asterisk, I think he only exists because I let him in. Not through the door, through the silence. Asterisk. They never found him. The man known only as Keegan, if that was his name, became a shadow within a shadow. No fingerprints in national databases. No match on facial recognition. His handwriting, his patterns, his presence, they were the only things he ever left behind. But that was enough. Because what Keegan left behind was a psychological footprint, one as detailed and deliberate as any crime scene. The behavioral analysts called it symbiotic stalking. Not driven by lust or rage or even control in the traditional sense, but by a pathological need to exist in parallel with another human being. He didn't want to be seen, he wanted to share space, to be part of someone's routine without ever announcing himself, to become part of the background hum of their lives. a coat that was slightly out of place, a light that flickered at the same time every night, a book left open to the wrong page. And Marion somehow noticed. Most people don't. That's what makes this type of predator so effective. But Marion felt it. "I used to be able to tell when someone was reading over my shoulder," she wrote in one of her unsent letters. "It's like a cold spot on the back of your neck. That's how this feels. All the time." Experts said Keegan's psychology pointed to early childhood trauma, likely abandonment, foster care, institutionalization. Someone who learned how to vanish in plain sight, who built his identity around being invisible. But what made him terrifying wasn't his disappearance, it was his patience. He would wait, study, map the routines, understand the plumbing, the ductwork, the schedule of footfalls in the hallway, then insert himself not suddenly but subtly, like a scent you can't place, or a shadow that always falls the wrong way. The crawl space in apartment 6B had insulation pressed down like a nest, fibers crushed into a shape that mirrored a seated figure. The flashlight found there had a dying battery last used in December 2002. Forensic reconstruction suggested Keegan had likely lived within the building inside the very walls for at least 6 weeks before Marion disappeared. And the most harrowing detail, he may have been there before she moved in. Lowell sat for hours with Marion's letters. Not the police reports, not the evidence, just the words Marion never sent. She wrote about her routines, how she liked the sound of rain at night, how she kept her tea tins alphabetized, how she missed her sister who died when they were teenagers, a name she never mentioned to co-workers. In one letter she asked, "Do you think someone can love you without ever meeting you?" In another, weeks later, "I'm not sure he's here to hurt me. I think he just wants to be known. And I think I'm the first person who ever saw him for what he was." Keegan didn't kill for pleasure, he killed for preservation. The moment Marion truly saw him, when she identified him not as a trick of the light or a whisper in the vent, but as a man, the bond broke. And in his twisted mind, the only way to keep her with him was to stop the world from taking her back. Lowell closed the file 6 months later, not because the case was solved, but because the only person who could truly explain it, the one who understood him, was gone. And in the end, what haunted her most wasn't the crime, it wasn't the photos, or the sketch of the vent, or even the whisper Callie heard through the wall. It was this, a line scribbled in the corner of Marion's final unfinished letter. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then he didn't take me. I gave him the silence he wanted, and now it's yours. Asterisk. The apartment remains empty. Not officially, it's been listed leased, cleaned, repainted. New tenants come and go. Some stay a few months, some only weeks, but none of them last. They complain of strange noises, lights that flicker at exactly 1:47 a.m., dreams about walls breathing. And always they say the same thing on their way out. "I just couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me." The light in the corner, the one Marion left on, still burns. Maintenance has replaced the bulb 4 times. It always burns out within 3 days. No one knows why. Or maybe they do. But no one wants to say it out loud. Because what's most terrifying about this story, what stays with you long after the door to 6B has closed, isn't the disappearance, it's the possibility. The possibility that some silences are not empty. That someone could be with you now, not knocking, not breaking in, but waiting. In the walls, in the ductwork, just behind the hum of the heater. And the next time you turn off the light and listen closely, you might hear it. Stay. Thank you for staying with us through this quiet descent into apartment 6B. A story not of screams, but of whispers. If this left a chill in your spine or a silence in your room, consider subscribing to Deep Dive for more stories like this one, slow, haunting, unforgettable. Leave a comment if you've ever experienced something off, something you couldn't explain. We read them all. Until next time, keep your ears open, your lights on, and remember, not every silence is empty.